All right, it's 8 o'clock. We'll call to order the monthly meeting of the Village of Cold Spring Planning Board for May 26th. It's roll call. Member Rose.
Here.
Member Sari.
Here.
Member
Here.
Member Glevinson.
Here.
All right, very good. All present and accounted for. All right, approval of the minutes. We're catching up. We have our new secretary who did a great job on the first set. I sent out a packet February 11th, February 25th, and March 10th. I believe we went through all those. I went back through the minutes, and I think we did approve them. They actually include all the edits, so I sent them out. I have not had a chance to go through May 12th, which was the last meeting, which is the first set that Michael's done for us. He got them out very quickly, but we probably should go through them pretty carefully.
Okay, let's hold on.
Do we want to do that tonight? You want to table that?
Let's hold
All
on.
right. All right. Can I get a motion to approve February 11th, February 25th, and March 10th so we can get those posted?
Motion.
Okay. Thank you. Seconded by Dave. Thank you. Okay. Report of members. I don't have anything since the last meeting. Anybody else? Nothing? Nope. Okay, very good. Move on to correspondence. We have a couple letters. We have two communications that came through code enforcement from Bill Bajarski. One is from Fred Payne, the commissioner at the county, and the other one is from the architect engineer from Flushing, New York for the United States Postal Service. Both of them are related to the modifications and changes at Leahy, so we probably should just leave these for discussion with the application. We have also related to that, just right before the meeting, I don't think Al included you guys, the chair of the Historic District Review Board just sent a reminder. We had discussed this several meetings ago about the Timmy Arch, the Ida Timmy Arch, the memorial arch on the 1940 addition to the hospital. That part of the conditions of the demolition were to remove and then reinstall in a public place. He reminded the applicant. It went out to Matt Moran and Paul as well, and it's been Matt's already replied. It's pretty straightforward. It's just that the arch has to be deinstalled and then reinstalled in a public space.
Mm-hmm.
So he just wanted to remind this board as well as the applicant about the arch, and obviously you're aware of it. We discussed it at prior meetings, so I think that's fine. There's a letter of May. Three-page letter. A letter from Margaret Whalen received on May 26th, dated May 25th. It's a very long letter. Basically, the body of it, I mean, we can make it available, is basically, so the efforts are being made to get a senior. She's basically saying that she's concerned about the medical center moving out of Leahy Pavilion. It's fairly lengthy. I don't know if we're going to go through the whole. Why don't I'll submit it to the board, make a copy, and submit it to the board.
Applicants probably get a copy.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yes,
It's
absolutely.
about specifically about the application.
It is. Yeah. They're allowed to see letters from citizens. Just, I guess if they send it to the board. Okay. All right. Very good. All right. So we'll do that. That's it for correspondence. So the next piece is unfinished business, which is obviously Butterfield Realty, the application for an amended site plan for change of use at the Leahy Pavilion. We obviously were working from the memo that the village attorney had prepared, dated April 22nd, 2016, basically advising us of the framework and the legal argument as to his interpretation of the code, working with Bill Bajarski from Code Enforcement. Basically saying that it is a change of use and it does require an updated parking plan, and that's what was requested. The parking table was was provided by the applicant, I think was it Monday or Friday, I forget what the day was. So we have that Friday. That went over to John. John reviewed it. John had some comments on it today that he sent to the board and basically gave us an updated review of that and his position on that. Unfortunately, I do not have that. I just came from the airport and John doesn't have it. I have the text of it, but I don't have the... So has everybody received this? Right, so you guys, it came in in the afternoon, 2:21?
Yeah.
Right. Basically talking about the parking table and his opinions on that. So one piece of information that most folks are probably already aware of if you're following this is the mayor has asked the village board to approve some funding to get a second opinion on the code interpretation because it's such an important issue, and certainly you want to make sure that when you're following the advice, our attorney, especially on something where there are threats or where there are, whatever we want to call them, you want to make sure that you're right. So the mayor with the village board last night Tuesday night rather, approved funding to get a second opinion from Rodenhausen Shale. So that's going to happen very soon. We expect to probably have that next week. Next week probably. It's a preliminary review. It's basically just a quick review of the code. John maintains his position on the code as far as his interpretation. When you worked with the parking table that you sent out this afternoon, was that with Bill Bajarski or was that just on your own?
Today, I was just on my own and was just really updating, it was really just looking at their parking table and
commenting on that.
Commenting on that.
Okay.
And updating it based upon some of the recent changes that they explained with the medical office, adding the 1,500 square feet to the medical office. So it was really just an update of what I worked on with the building inspector based upon the new information.
Okay, so obviously we're not going to be able to take any action until we have a second opinion. We don't want to obviously, make a move until the mayor gives us the opinion of special counsel that tells us whether or not we're on the right track or whether or not we're not. Because obviously there's a difference of opinion between the two attorneys. That's not all that unusual. Law is kind of a living, breathing thing, and attorneys interpret it, courts interpret it for us finally. So I mean, the village obviously wants to make sure that they manage that risk, which I think is wise to get. I think they approved $1,000 will be something south of that to get an opinion, which is something that I would always do in business, and I think it's a wise move. So we'll wait for that to come in. But what we'll do tonight, although we won't be taking any action, is we'll proceed. Much to contrary to what's been in one of the newspapers, that there's all these delays. There haven't been any delays. I mean, since the packet was received, we immediately started processing it. Every time the applicant wanted on the agenda, we put them on the agenda, even though it was typically past the time of issuing the agenda. So this has been processed straight through. At the only point we waited was when the village attorney and the mayor advised you need an application, which the village attorney had been asking for Mr. Barshaw for several months prior. There were constant emails saying we need an application, which was not Mr. Barshaw's understanding at the last meeting, but obviously that's what's in the record that the village attorney has. So now we have an application, we have direction from the village attorney working with code enforcement, who are obviously the officers, the code enforcement officer of the village. So I think we have a clear path until, of course, we'll take final action. We're gonna withhold final action until we get the final opinion, the secondary opinion, and then the village board. Obviously, I imagine we'll have some sort of a meeting. Look, I assume if they're in complete agreement, that it's very clear. If there's some sort of difference in between, then we'll see where that goes. But obviously, we can't predict the future, and I think we want to keep things moving. So what we should do tonight is process the application. The board will have questions. We actually haven't worked on this. You would think in reading, at least one of the papers that we've done all this work on it. We haven't. We've taken the information in from the applicant and gone as far as we can with the information that we have. So tonight, with the information that we have, there have been several changes with respect to a 1,500 square foot carve out over at Leahy. Then that was then moved in the last communication that the applicant sent in, saying that they're going to take 1,500 square feet additionally over at building number 2. So now I think we can just go through, the board members are going to have questions to make sure they understand the application. And let's just start there. I think that's probably the best place to start. obviously, we want to make sure, and I will continue to referee, in my position as chair, that we have to stay on the impacts that are demonstrated from this application, right? Yes, there's a lot of talk about, is the condo parking sufficient? It's not, there's no demonstrated impact of this on that. You can't look at that, right? So that's my opinion. Obviously, you guys all have your own opinions. You're all, free to vote however you want. Someone can make a motion, someone can send this in a different direction. But what I'll keep doing is, when I feel that we're strayed onto an area that we haven't demonstrated an impact, I'll bring that up. The board, obviously, this is a democracy. It's how it works. You guys, if you feel differently, you certainly can make a motion to go in a different direction. But it is in the best interest of the village to make sure that it's very clear that there's a demonstrated impact of what we're looking at from this application. As this is a shared parking plan that takes 3 buildings into account, building number 1, building number 2, and Leahy, I think that's very clear that the parking plan is one entity that is shared among the 3 buildings. So I think that's reasonable to ask questions about. We're gonna have questions about the tenant fit out, because obviously that's how we calculate the parking, that's how you complete the parking table. The building inspector, as well as the village attorney, have applied a use of public assembly, and that was with Bill as well, right? That was Bill's direction, all right? So that has a slightly different code. It's probably not any less favorable. It's probably, it's
Actually, I think it would require less spaces based upon what we were looking at.
Well, it would depend on the seats.
Depending on the seats.
We're not sure we see all the seats. It's 1 for 200 square feet, but not less than 1 parking space for every 5 seats. So we'll look at that. We're gonna need to understand that. We're gonna need to understand, I think, as well, what this solarium is. On one of the drawings, it looks like it's under roof. On the other one, it looks like it's a patio. So who wants to start?
I'll start.
I had a question relative to the shared parking. I'm sorry?
You mind if I sit here so I can take notes?
Yeah,
sure. I had a question related to the shared parking. In your original submittal for the site plan, you had put in there that you were looking for 20% shared parking. As the project developed and the design developed, that got decreased to 11.2%, which was ultimately approved by the planning board. I believe it was in April of 2015. I looked through the documents and I could not find a demonstration of shared parking, because I was going to look at that in relationship to your now requested 20% shared parking and see if there was any equal value between the 11.2 and the 20%, whether we could, look to review it and possibly approve it. Did you provide anything to the board at that time to demonstrate the shared parking? Because that's a code requirement.
There's a parking table that was on the approved site plan.
Right.
Okay, and that's what we're using.
All right, but you have to demonstrate, you understand what shared parking is,
Sure.
correct?
I
All
think
right.
he's just trying to look, what was the prior board's basis for granting the waiver? And I think it'll help him understand as far as whether to grant the additional waiver necessary.
Is it the
Potentially.
waiver, or is it the justification for shared parking itself that you're asking for?
Well, the waiver, you have to justify that it's shared parking.
Okay.
So I think it.
Yeah, just on the record, I want to say that we feel there's no additional parking, that all the parking is provided, but we are willing to answer your questions.
Okay.
So, during the approval process, there was some groups that felt that we should use the, I think it was called the SMART code, which is much lower than what the village code was. And during the process, they basically said, let's meet somewhere in the middle. And I think when you factor in, we've got 35 spaces for Leahy, and then the other ones were at 20%. I think building 1, 2 were at 20%. I think when you average that in, and I don't really remember how the residential was, but definitely the parking table dictated, everything that happened at the meeting. That was the final result. That's why we ended up with 11.2%.
So there was no actual demonstration of shared parking and how that would balance. I mean, shared parking, basically the way I read it is, if you have a business that works during the day and I have a business that works at night, we can share the same space. based on the uses that I see on the site and the revised plan, I don't see any chance of that happening.
Dave, this was the reason I voted against the site plan, is that I felt that the concept of shared parking would not work here, and it wasn't demonstrated to my knowledge, although I greatly favor all aspects of the project. I felt that we were walking down a path that was going to create, you know, a parking problem, and the
Mhm.
village has a history of parking
Right.
problems. And so I was looking for, a demonstration, I put it, explaining how, the shared parking would work. And I never got it. And I
Yeah.
also asked, in the event that I'm wrong or I'm right and everybody else is wrong, because everybody disagreed with me. They all the other members of the board and the consultant all felt that I was wrong. But I also asked is that in the event that there is inadequate parking, and I'm right, where will that parking be placed? And that question was never answered.
That's a good point. There were 4 other board members that disagreed with you.
That is true. They voted against. They voted for 11.2. But I didn't feel that it had been demonstrated. Perhaps I missed something, Paul. Perhaps you could tell me how you're going to, use the concept of shared parking as defined in B4A.
Well, residential, okay, we have a lot of residential on the site, okay, and when you share residential with commercial, it's a good mix, and that's the shared parking.
Right, but what
But
you
I don't-
have is one parking spot for each condo, and each condo, or most of them, are 2-bedroom units, and they're all under the building. So for the seniors,
Not all the parking spots, no.
well, I was told that all the parking for the condos would be
That
under
meant
the...
code, but we exceeded the code in that area.
I don't think I understand what you're saying.
We only had to provide 1 space per unit.
That is correct,
We provided more than that.
but you still took 11.2% reduction, did you not? On the condo parking?
I think it was an 11.2% overall, correct?
Right, but the 11.2% was a reduction as well as the condo parking. And one of my concerns is that, if, for instance, the people that live in the condos, if their spaces are available, that would mean that the seniors and other groups, and at that time we were talking, the seniors would be in building 2 and not Leahy, that they would end up walking, or trying to walk from Hope. So I didn't want to vote against it, but I felt that it was a problem, and that's why I voted. But I still would like to understand how, how you're gonna do shared parking as defined by B4A.
I
still don't see
understand what you said, Paul, in relationship to the residential versus the commercial space. But the way I look at it is that only benefits the residents at night. Because if you look at your traffic study and all the other documents as it relates to the residents, very few of the residents leave the site during rush hour, during the day, all right? Which leads me to believe that the concept was based on that virtually nobody's working that lives there, all right? When you have anywhere from 3 to 5 cars leaving the site during normal working hours, that there's not a lot of people leaving. So during the day, there's no real value in shared use. At night, absolutely. But the shared use is global. It encompasses the 24-hour period, the work day and at night. So the night part I get.
As we know, we went through a lengthy seeker process,
Mm.
okay? The approval took over 3 years, right? This was all evaluated at the time. We had one dissenting vote, which is Arnie didn't agree.
Right.
And I understand. But we addressed all this at that time.
All right.
That's
I'm
why
not-
we had a parking table, and we need to adhere to the parking table.
Well, I'm not looking at the 11.2%, I'm looking at the 20%, or the gap between the 11.2 and the 20. I mean, that's my personal opinion anyway.
I would like to make the point that there's also some people on the board that wanted less parking on site, less pavement, okay?
Well, from a drainage standpoint, I can understand that aspect, but from a practical standpoint, I don't think it works.
There also, with the 11.2, does not take into account all the non-conforming spaces, which total about, I think it's either 18 or 19. So, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think when you factor those in, it gets pretty close
Okay.
to meeting code. And, we all know that there are smaller cars, and all these cars, I'm sure, all these spaces will be filled at
Sure.
some time. So, it's very close to meeting code if you take the non-conforming spaces.
Mhm.
Paul, in the adjustment that you requested to put the medical building, well, basically move the medical building out of Lake,
Yes.
correct? When I try to envision it, and I'm trying to think of the shared parking and the times in which people are going to be using the medical buildings, people aren't necessarily leaving the residential spaces, understanding that you said 19 or 20 non-conforming spaces.
18 or 19.
18 or 19? Just because I am visual and I have you here right now, where are those exactly? Roughly, how are they scattered around?
Which ones?
The non-conforming spaces. Because from a practical standpoint, when I think about, okay, if we're looking at 11.2 or 20% waiver, and I think of the medical building being moved, I think of the senior center being used, I think of people being home that are 55 and older, I think of them all at the same time. I don't know if I'm correct, but I think I am. So I just want to know exactly where would those non-conforming spaces be, just so I can see it.
We'd have to identify it. I don't think we ever, there is a drawing probably somewhere. I'd have to locate.
I think it's the perpendicular spots, right?
Right, 5 perpendicular spaces and 16 parallel spaces.
End to end,
I
yeah.
think up
So
here,
it's
some
up-
of the
Yeah,
parallel spots are up here. Paul?
correct.
Between these two buildings are the parallel parking?
Between
I'm
4
not
and 5
sure.
and 3.
I'm
Yeah.
not sure.
Yeah.
So right here.
Yeah.
Is that, they say non-conforming?
Well, no, but that's where the parallel parking was.
Yeah, but I don't think making them parallel means they're
Well,
non-conforming.
it said on the table here.
It says on the table that they're non-conforming, that those were the
Well, the parallel?
non-conforming.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I think the other one was the perpendicular ones, right? It's been a while since I looked at them,
Yep,
right?
yeah, so there's 5, 21 non-conforming.
And does that also include the underground parking? I think in building number 3,
There's some there as well.
there are 5 compact spaces.
I believe that's.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's in 4
So
and
as far
5.
as the surface,
You want to?
Yep. So, because I don't have the big guy in front of me.
You want to show 'em?
Right.
Well, there was one other thing that I wanted to just bring your attention to. If we move forward with this, at some point, you're gonna have to go back, or somebody in your organization, I think Matt Moran did it last time. This is the supplemental requirements for B4A as it relates to code. When you're moving the medical, or planning on moving the medical from one location to another location, we need a document that certifies that you're gonna meet all the code requirements for all of those changes. Mostly because if you read at the end of that certification, it ties all of those uses to specific buildings as the approved plan. Now, if it ends up changing, you're gonna have to go back and recertify all of that. Basically, it's a form.
I'm at a disadvantage tonight, I don't have my attorney with me.
Okay.
Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to defer to him on that.
Okay. All right.
Are you done, Dave?
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about the parking table that you prepared and submitted. I went to B4A, And what B4A says that the parking shall conform with 134.18E. And what 134.18E is that there are different parking, as you know, there are different parking requirements for different uses. For instance, professional physicians' offices are different than retail, which is different, from assembly halls and stuff like that. So it isn't simply a question of that the fact that the footprint of the buildings have not changed. The fact that the uses have changed may impact the parking when you look at the parking table. So specifically, I looked at Leahy, where you're moving the senior center in, and you're also moving in the post office and retail. And for instance, when I look at your table here, it says county/offices, 10,000 square feet, one space for 300 square feet. And I don't know where you get that, where you pick
The parking
three.
table on the approved map.
Well, when I have a copy of 134 here.
No, I think, I'm talking about B4A, the parking schedule that's on the approved site plan.
Well, I mean, is it conceivable that it may be wrong? But when I turn,
Taylor, I heard
Yeah.
Yes.
It doesn't have anything for Leahy, because that was the medical use that
Wasn't
was
calculated, right?
Well, it has 35
granted
spots.
35 spots,
Yeah.
right. So I think we understand, at least I understand, 35 spots is now moving over to building number 2, which you have on your table, and I and the building inspector, neither of us have any issue with that, because that's the historical use for that
For the
use.
use, right?
So.
Setting aside the
Just
15.
1 second, if I can get that clear. You're saying Leahy medical use, 11,500 square feet, moving to building 2, you have no issue with that?
I don't, and the building inspector does.
He and the building inspector, right? The
No.
planning board hasn't picked that
It's-
up yet.
I understand, I just want to
Right.
be clear on that. And that's 35 spots?
Correct.
Okay.
Based upon
That's fine.
whatever
Yep.
letter you got from the CFO, and
Got it.
that's what the prior planning board
Yep.
granted, and you have to live with it for better or for worse, I think.
Got it.
But so now you have the new uses going into Leahy Pavilion. Leahy, my understanding, it's 1 story, correct? It's 1 floor?
one floor.
So under the code, retail stores, business and professional offices is 1 spot for each 150 square feet of ground floor area of the building, and then 300 square feet for the upper floor. So I would say any professional office and retail would be 1 per 150. And in this case, since the county's taking up 6,000 square feet, I think the remaining 4,000 would be 1 per 150. And then the county use itself, the senior center, the building inspector and I thought it'd be a public assembly use, which is actually 1 space for each 200 square feet of floor area. So you actually get a little bit of break, but not less than 1 space for each 5 seats where provided. Now, when we were looking at the floor plans, the building inspector and I, this was about 2 or 3 weeks ago, floor plans we had showed the seating or whatever, it worked out where it was 1 for 200 square feet, based upon what we were looking at. So you'd actually have less need for parking, as opposed to retail, which is 1 per 150.
Right. And the planning board hasn't done a technical review of that.
Right.
And I think you also wanted to go back to the 119 dated plans too, so we're gonna have to look at that. Because of their determination that it's public assembly that this board hasn't voted on, but I suspect that they would probably, they'd probably agree. I mean, it makes the most sense. It certainly is an office space. If I may, I think this mistake is by going back to the table and not the code. I think the way retail got attached to 150 and office got attached to 300 was because that's the way building number 2 was. Because the first floor is 150, right? It's 1 per 150, right? And on building number 1 and building number 2, retail was always on the first floor. Office spaces were on the upper floors. Upper floors have 1 per 300. So I think somebody just looked at the table and somehow associated retail at 1 per 150 and office at 1 per 300 by looking at the table, just
Retail-
because of their locus of use on the site. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's
Retail
just,
was
I think it's a
always-
simple mistake.
Yeah, retail was 1 per 150, right? Lower level, we all agree.
Well,
on
just
that.
so we're clear though, retail and professional office have the same use. They have the same multiplier. If they're on the first floor, it's 1 per 150. If they're on upper floors, it's 1 per 300.
We always knew though that the senior center, okay, or municipal use was the 1 to 300. Okay?
Because it was on the upper floor.
Yes. So
But now it come down to a ground floor, to a first floor.
come down to a first floor, but the
If
use
the
is
Leahy
still
move.
1 for 300.
No, that's what I'm saying, it's a mistake by looking at the table, it doesn't follow the code. It used to be that, so the way the site was laid out, in the site plan approval, retail was always on the first, which makes sense, that's where retail is, office space was above. Retail and professional have the same use and the same parking requirements. On the first floor, it's 1 per 150, on the upper floors, it's 1 per 300. But in the site plan approval, retail's always on the first, and office is always on the upper floor. So I think somebody made the assumption that retail's at 1 at 150 and office space is 1 at 300. I think it's just it's a simple mistake.
Right. Yeah, on the original parking table, it assumed that all retail would be on the first floor and all office space would be on the second and third floors.
I think it's just a simple mistake. I'm just trying to cut to the chase. I mean, I think that the code's very clear. It's just that the site plan pro was misleading by looking at the parking table.
Let's not, look past it, that it's an approved drawing, okay?
No, we're talking about your updated parking table.
Oh, my updated
Yeah.
parking table.
Yeah,
Well, my updated just follows what we did on the original parking table.
that's the mistake. It's just that because now the use on Leahy, it's first floor, right?
Yeah, let me ask you this question. If the senior center and the post office stayed in building number 2, right? And the medical use stayed in Leahy, there would be no additional issues with parking, correct?
I think. Look, I mean,
I'm asking a question.
absolutely. You're saying if you were to withdraw your application.
Yeah.
If you were to withdraw your application, it's my opinion, the board hasn't voted on it, that this board has no jurisdiction, and it would be very ill-advised to even look at any of this. Too much time has passed, you have your approvals. Do we believe that the initial approvals were done properly? No, I don't. We'll see what the other board has to think. But the planning board is a quasi-judicial board. We don't have legislative, we're not gonna go look at things, nor it would be really risky to do that. So no, if you were to withdraw your application, there's no issue. That doesn't mean, part of what Mr. Barshaw put in his first letter that we kept going around and around was that Leahy was compliant with the zoning. And I think that's really kind of the crux of the issue is there a substandard condition that existed that was grandfathered? That, I believe, is at the center of your disagreement, right? Because when you talk about whether or not we can look at this as a change of use, that's secondary to, it doesn't matter what you call it, it's a rose is still a rose. But what does matter is there a substandard use that was approved? The village, the code enforcement officer, and the village attorney say yes, that the 35 spaces were grandfathered as a pre-existing, non-conforming use to remain as is. And that's how the site plan was done, right? So no different than, you have I've got a building that I just remodeled that is not ADA compliant. I put plans in, the plans examiner makes the whole building ADA compliant, I go to get a C of O, and he says, now you need a ramp, an ADA ramp. Well, I mean, because you touch it, you own it. So that's kind of the concept here, is that when you go back and touch things, and that's really what we're talking about. This is not anybody trying to do anything other than their job, which is the code has to apply. And we are allowed to give up to a 20% waiver. So nobody's done enough math to know whether or not this can be approved. The question is how, we have to do the technical review. And the planning board hasn't done any of that work yet, because we haven't gotten far enough. So if the application were removed, right, were withdrawn, I would not support any action towards looking at the prior approvals, no. But if you're asking me if it's there, I'm not sure what your question is. I think your question is it code compliant now?
What I'm asking
It's
you-
approved is what it is.
If all the uses that were approved, okay, Leahy Medical, Senior Center in building number 2, post office, in the retail area, right? There's no additional parking required. It's as per the site plan.
You have an approved site plan to
Yes.
do that, yes.
Okay, so now the fact that we're moving 11,500 square feet from one building and we're flipping it to another building, which basically the difference would be the office space. It would be, in Leahy would now be 6,000 square feet of senior center, 4,000 square feet of office, and 1,500 square feet for the post office. Now we're saying that triggers some kind of review. Is that your position?
Right.
It changes the parking calculations, which has to be reviewed, and they have to determine whether they can grant an additional waiver. And obviously, one of your arguments is gonna be, you know, the uses are still the same.
Yeah, the uses are still the same.
Throughout the whole site, but, you know, that's.
So has anybody?
But you are,
haven't-
but you and the building inspector are applying a different use. That's not on the approved site plan. Public assembly is not on the approved
Public
site
assembly,
plan.
So, I mean, based upon what we saw, it actually triggered less parking spaces, but we have to see the
It may,
latest floor plan.
it may well. I mean,
Right.
it's, you know, we need to see.
So what did the
see it.
numbers come out to for that building, if you did it the way you're doing it?
I had, for the community center, I had 30 spaces.
Okay.
And then for the retail portion, so that was another 4,000, I had 26.
Well, why would that be, if it's office, why would you consider it retail?
Professional
Office
retail, it's the
retail.
same use,
Right.
same
Same
one per
square
150. One space for every 150 square feet.
Right.
Professional office and retail.
Because you have, here, I'll show you right here, this is my notes. So you have county offices, 10,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So 6,000 of that is the senior center, correct? So I applied the 1 per 200.
So you're saying the 4,000 square feet now is 1 for 150?
Correct, because it's on the first floor. So I had a total of 30, plus 26.
And the post office will be
And
the
then
same,
the 10,
1,500?
right. So I had 66 spaces for Leahy. And that's not including the 11.2% waiver, which was already granted. So I didn't subtract the 11.2%, but that's 66 as per the code. So the code, the switch of the uses just triggers a new parking
66 or
table.
56?
Oh, I'm sorry.
30.
56.
56.
So I'm an attorney, not an engineer.
Gotcha, no problem.
So,
And just to be clear, that's the village attorney's review.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the planning board would have to do a technical review, you know, that would confirm that. We haven't confirmed any of that yet.
no,
We
so
just,
at
we
least-
just got a
At least
230.
I understand, you know, where you're going with this.
The crux of the issue is really, did a substandard condition exist that was grandfathered? That's where Mr. Barshaw maintains that no substandard condition ever existed. The village attorney does not agree with that. We're gonna get a second opinion on that, among other things. So if it doesn't exist, then what he's trying to maintain in all of his memos is that you can't now ask for it. He doesn't agree with that, right? Nor does the code enforcement. They're saying that it's a change of use, no different than, you know, if you take the last 5 applications that we just processed, right?
Yep.
You know, you're going from an office to a coffee shop. You're going from an office to a barber and a brew. You're going from an office to adding a couple hundred square feet of office. So we look at the prior approvals, and then we need to be brought up to code. That's the way every application has been processed that's gone through this board.
Okay, so you received this memo on April 22nd. When are we going to be able to look at it?
April 22nd. That memo is advice of counsel. It's not subject to FOIL. I mean, I think that what it is what we've shared with you, what we can, which is basically that's the opinion of the village attorney and the code enforcement officer working together, that it's a change of use and you have to comply with parking.
So that's confidential? You're
Correct.
going to keep that, okay?
Correct.
So I would assume that you're going to be paying for the fee on that, correct? Since it's not available to me. I'm not going to pay
I don't-
that out of my escrow.
I don't know,
right?
the attorney would have
It was
to,
analyzed.
it's analyzing the application would be my
It's not-
answer.
It's not
but
public for me,
6
so
pages.
I'm not using it. I just want to make sure that we're not paying for that.
I don't, Ms. Squiller, I don't know that you're buying paper. I think what you're,
Oh.
we're processing your application, and I don't know that you're,
That has to be public information, anything.
I don't believe that's true, but I mean, that's,
All right, well, like I said, my
Sure.
attorney's not here, so
All right,
that would be
understood.
wrong. I just want to make sure that
I mean, look.
we're not going to get that, you're saying?
Right, we get, nor would we get anything confidential from yours. I mean, it's, we have to process the application. Your attorney, you know, gives us a 9-page memo, our attorney has to review it, then give us an opinion. You know, certainly when, you know, people start threatening lawsuits, we can't be sharing information. I mean, but we're sharing as much as we can, which I think is,
We're just looking for what your
I could
concerns
share,
are.
I mean, if the board's okay, I could share the table that I put together recently that
That's
just
fine,
shows
yeah.
numbers and statistics.
yeah, that's really the crux of it. Nobody's hiding anything. It's basically that,
Whatever you could give us, you know, we see nothing. We haven't seen any of your concerns yet.
Well, that's why we're here tonight,
Yeah.
Correct.
expressing our
So
concerns.
just whatever you can share with us, that's what we want to
If the
say.
board's okay, I can give them the table that I sent you guys this afternoon.
Yeah.
That's just numbers.
It's numbers and it's square footage.
right, but you might want to give them more than that. I mean, I don't have any issue with you, with the, you know, we don't want to go into the legal argument, right? But certainly, you certainly want to discuss what you're finding, what you and the village
Yeah,
code
it's
enforcement
the table.
officer. So just to say, okay, fine, right. With the understanding of it, obviously, that's their work. The planning board would follow the direction to say, okay, change of use is triggered, process the application as a change of use. Because we are quasi judicial, we don't have a whole lot of, we don't have any wiggle room, right? We basically apply the code. And when there's any question, we ask the village attorney. Once code enforcement gets involved, I mean, that's it. That's really that's what we have to follow.
So your issues are limited to parking, right?
Well, we're gonna have to, we're also gonna have to look at circulation. There's also the issue of the loading area at Leahy. There was the confusion, or rather misrepresentation, that was approved, that's what was presented to us at the February 25th meeting. It was approved for building number 2. It was not approved for Leahy. So we have to look at that. Another thing on Leahy is we're gonna have to look at what this solarium is, right? You know, it shows it, in one building, in one of the plans, it looks like it's just a patio. In another one, it has a door, which
It's a
would assume that
patio.
it's under roof.
It's a patio.
What's the
With
door?
nothing. What door?
The door into, so,
I thought it was that one.
I have one,
We're going to use the 119, right, drawing?
The sketch.
Yeah.
yeah, on the 119, it doesn't appear to be a structure.
And it says outdoor garden area.
Okay. So that's just hardscape? It's just
Yeah.
a patio? Okay.
That's right, for them to sit outside.
Okay. On one of the plans, and it may be, obviously, it may just be that the county was just drawing, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, but obviously that would be an increase that we'd have to look at.
No.
The other piece, obviously, we need to look at is the siting of the loading area with respect to ingress, egress, fire lanes, and
You know,
and circulation.
we have letters from the post office, right?
Right.
Talking about that. They met with Bill Wazarski.
Yeah, let's,
So I don't know if we can read those into the
yeah,
record.
we'll do those now that we're doing that. So saying we should, I
Would
didn't
you
want
like
to
a representative of the post office to read that?
No, we don't need to.
No? Okay.
There's
So-
also an email which I received that your attorney was CC'd on from the building inspector on that subject as well.
Did you receive that?
I sent that to you guys this
Yeah,
afternoon.
we have it.
Yeah,
This morning.
Basically
It's-
saying he has no problem with that.
that he has a right, okay. So, the postal representative, in a letter dated May 25th to Mr. Bajarski, it was a pleasure to meet with you in regards to a new United States Postal retail facility at the Butterfield Square development to serve the Cold Spring community. The new Cold Spring retail facility will provide the community with a full customer service window, including stamp sales, money orders, passport photos, shipping needs, international mail, retail products, business mailings, and premium forwarding. In addition, the facility will have post office box services and parcel lockers with 24/7 access. The facility will be manned by 2 clerks. There'll be 1 pickup of mail per day utilizing a 7-ton truck measuring 8 feet wide by 29 long at 5 to 5:30. So who was the postal rep here that made the statement that night? That's saying they send 60-foot trucks at night?
I was here the
Oh, was
first
that-
time, and I guessed that they said how long was the truck, I had no idea, so that right after that, I got clarified by the trucking company.
Oh, that was you that evening?
That's correct.
Oh, okay, very good. All right, very good. Yeah, so that would just need to be in the site. Obviously, we'd accommodate the requirements. The site would do that, but the site plan would have to look at where that sites and the circulation around it. As you know, the current proposed location in the Leahy Pavilion works best for the USPS due to the low slopes of the area. The initial location of building number 2 proposed was on an area of the property that possesses slopes that are considered dangerous for operation. In compliance with the USPS standard design criteria AS-503, drop-off lanes, loading unloading zones are to be located in flat areas to prevent vehicle accidents or slipping during inclement weather. In addition, the USPS must comply with the ADA, Architectural Barriers Act. The previous location made it difficult to comply with ADA, ABA. The new location at Leahy Pavilion works best for our operations for the following reasons: better grades, better access, almost completely flat truck loading/unloading, handicap accessibility due to the right grades, more accessible to the parking area, easier access for customers. Overall, it's a much better location to serve the Cold Spring community. If you need any further clarification, please don't hesitate to contact me. Thank you guys for cooperation and attention to this matter. Very truly yours, Louis Sanchez, architect engineer, out of the Flushing, New York office for the USPS. The other was a letter rather of May 20th to Bill Bajarski from Penna, the commissioner over at the county. Mr. Bajarski, as was explained at the Cold Spring Planning Board meeting on 5/12, and further discussed at our 5/18 meeting, improvements to internal traffic flow, pedestrian circulation, and safety were achieved by moving the Phillipstown Senior Center from Building 2 to the Leahy Pavilion. The use of Building 2 for the County Senior Center created several operational issues. Specifically, access to and from the building for seniors would have been problematic. Secondary egress was provided by stairwells, which was not conducive for seniors. The grade along the west side of Building 2 and the dead-end parking area along the north side of the structure did not allow for proper senior drop-off and also posed a problem for bus circulation. The elevator entry is not preferred for seniors. Restroom facilities cannot be provided near the entrances and would require seniors to take the elevator before reaching a restroom. The kitchen equipment raised structural concerns, the live load, I would assume. Although some improvements could have been engineered at an additional cost during our early meeting with the developer, the Leahy Pavilion itself presented a solution to foregoing issues at no additional cost. That was the live load to the floor, yeah, because there's no columns in the building, right? It spans the full width of the building, the joists.
No, there's some columns.
Oh, there are interior columns? The Leahy Pavilion is a direct replacement to proposed building number 2. Therefore, an additional parking table study is unnecessary because there will be no change in scope, size, function, or the use of 2 buildings at issue. Clearly, the Leahy Pavilion is a superior site for senior center because of its more level area and at-grade construction, which would significantly improve senior access, would eliminate kitchen load issues, would allow for secondary egress onto an on-grade and level area, would improve the bus drop-off location, and would eliminate the acceptable and dangerous bus U-turn. Finally, the bus schedule and duration would not change and would have the same requirements and impacts of building number 2 as it would at the Leahy Pavilion. Sincerely, Fred Pena, PESQ, Commissioner. Yeah, no, I think that's clear. I mean, I don't know about the rest of the board, but I don't, it's a private property. Where you have your uses, where you want to put things is up to you. The way we get involved, which is not to be interpreted as thwarting, is we have to apply the code. So a change of use comes in, you're free to put stuff wherever you need to put it. The uses are approved on the site. There was, the quote in the, the paper that the planning board is looking to remove uses. We have no authority to remove uses, nor would we look to remove uses. I wouldn't even expect that the village board would try something as, as frankly as boneheaded as that. You'd be subject to spot zoning, you'd be subject to all sorts of claims. Nobody's trying to do anything. What we're trying to do is process an application. That's it.
And we appreciate that. And, just want to go on the record again that, we don't agree.
You don't
with
agree, right.
Your position, but we're willing to try to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, and like I said, we haven't done a technical review to figure out where the parking waiver, where it ends up. John has done a calculation at 56, so that's a deficiency of 26 spaces, right? When you look at Leahy, because Leahy, and that was my point to Mr. Barshaw on February 25th, that it isn't really what you're asking for at all. What creates the issue is how the prior approvals were done. By grandfathering Leahy, if Leahy were brought up to code, this is my opinion, speaking just for myself, if Leahy were brought up to code at the point that the shared parking plan were contemplated, which is I think when it was touched, when you touch it, you own it, I think then we wouldn't really have, I probably would have agreed with Mr. Barlow back then where I said, well, this doesn't need, send it back to the building inspector, but that's not what
Right.
happened.
For instance, like when you have a switch between building 1 and building 2, since those were reviewed under code, you know, I don't think there's any issue.
Right.
And that's what was approved, something was supposed to go in building 1 and was switched over to building 2 back in September.
Right.
That didn't even go before the planning board.
No.
Because it was all approved and was up to code.
Because those buildings were brought up to code, and that was my position with Mr. Barshaw, where he kept insisting that it complied with zoning. I said, no, you have an approved site plan, that's true, your parking place was approved, which then does a zoning, but that doesn't mean that it complies with the code that's on the books here. You know, so like I said, that is the crux of it, right, this kind of substandard grandfathered condition.
That is, but I want to make sure that you're accurately presenting Mr. Barshaw's position. His position is not concerning nonconformity at all. In fact, his memo is very clear. The 35 spaces for existing medical use is not a grandfather of a nonconformity. Rather, the village board chose in Village Code 134-15A, subsection F, to authorize the planning board to use a different methodology to determine required parking for existing uses than parking spaces per number of square feet of occupancy. The planning board determined that 35 parking spaces had been provided for the medical use and that such parking was sufficient.
We are saying the same thing. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, they determined 35 spaces because that was a historical use for that site.
But-
Technically, it's not non-conforming, but it is, but it isn't.
Right. So that's where we are.
Yeah, so from a practical standpoint, we've got two buildings, Building 2 and Building and Leahy. Their front doors are probably about 70 feet apart, okay? So in one situation, same uses, going back to what was originally planned, parking would be fine, okay? Now we've got into this wrinkle where we're trying to move the seniors and the post office to, really, the planning board was very high on both coming to Butterfield. They wanted the senior center and they wanted the post office. So now the fact that we're moving them to accommodate them to Leahy, now you want to trigger this review where it could be 26 more spaces, which the only place the spaces are going to come from is for me to reduce my size of my development, correct? Because they're not, there's nowhere else we're going to find the
Like I said,
spaces.
we haven't done a technical review, nor
Okay.
have we applied the parking, nor have we applied the,
Well, I'm just,
the
what
waiver
I'm saying is,
right?
it would be okay if we just kept it the
I
way it
mean-
is, with same uses on the whole site. The problem is when we're moving them 70, 80 feet, now we have this issue. Now, it may be an issue code-wise. From a practicality standpoint, it shouldn't be an issue. All right, what should happen is that you should say, look, you know what, senior center was important, okay, at least to the prior planning board. Post office is important, and you should look at it and say, look, what can we do to try to work something out here? And that's my feeling.
Yeah,
Okay.
understood, but the first piece is, no, the planning board doesn't want to do anything. The planning board is bound by code, right? So we look at the code, that's what I told Mr. Barshaw on the February 25th. So we're bound by the code. Most we can do is a 20% parking waiver. If this is in fact a change of use, right, which we're clear now that it is, then we go ahead and process it. We haven't done a technical review. If you're 26 short and you do a 20% waiver, right, you know, that obviously reduces those parking spaces. So the planning board, it isn't a matter of want. It's that we're bound by the code.
All right.
Would
Right.
that include Village Code Section 134-15A, subsection F7? Are you bound by that?
I'm not familiar with what section you're referring to.
That's shared parking? Is that what you're
And-
talking
yeah,
about?
And how it's calculated and authorizing the planning board to make a decision.
Yeah, it says that you as the applicant have to demonstrate how shared parking works,
that
and we
was
can
to
go
the
up to
satisfaction of the
20%.
board previously.
Excuse me?
That's been
I think that's where we differ. All right, we're saying that you know, that use was provided for in our approval, and you're saying it's not. So that's where we'll have to.
11.2% was. I agree with that.
Yeah.
That's what it says in the approval letter. 20% wasn't. 20% is the ceiling in the code. It has nothing to do with the approval.
Look, all we're doing is, our position is we're moving uses, okay? And parking, you
But
know,
let's
shouldn't
not-
have to change.
But let's not lose sight of the fact that the code enforcement, the building inspector has applied a different use that's not on the site plan, that's not on the approved site plan. But it may actually require less parking once we understand the seats.
Paul, how many doctor's offices do you have
In what?
in Building 2 now? How many are you
I don't think it
moving?
matters, does it?
Well, yes, it does.
Why is that?
Because the code says, if, for instance, if you have 5 doctor's offices,
Yeah.
the code says that there shall be 5 parking spots per office. Now,
I
that
think
would be a total of 25.
There's a problem with that though, Arnie, is
So
that that's only in residential. If you look at that for
Yeah, I
medical
don't-
office,
Where's the
in
commercial?
residential districts,
Yeah.
I think,
Matt, where's
What?
the commercial?
what's that?
Where's the medical for commercial?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
No, the last time we talked about it, I thought the same thing as Arnie.
Right.
But I'd like to know, where is the commercial?
It doesn't
for-
exist in our
Oh, it
code.
doesn't
So,
exist.
so like the planning board applied professional office, it appears. The parking table, here's my drawing, right? The parking table,
This is just for in residential districts.
yeah, I mean, you're right, Arnie,
It doesn't
that,
specify medical offices. so
and
it's just
that
professional
code
offices.
of medical offices makes a lot more sense, because that shows kind of the impact of the reality of the number of seats in an office, the number of seats in a waiting room likely would translate directly to the number of cars out in the parking lot. Unfortunately, our code, I think, was written probably back when all the doctor's offices were in homes. They were homework occupations. So unfortunately, our medical office says in residential districts. We need to change that. We don't have anything that, so all the professional office does is just say 1 per 150, but you could create a very dense medical office that could send a ton of cars out to a parking lot, but right now, all we're allowed to ask for is 1 per 150. Would you agree that the only use you can apply is professional office?
Yeah,
That's all we've got.
Medical is just more specific, professional is a bigger umbrella.
Paul, you
Right,
see
but we
that's
can't
one
apply the
question.
medical
They don't have
because
a
it says
medical.
in residential and they're in a B4
They
and
don't
now
have-
B4A.
They don't have a medical office
Right.
designation
Right.
in a commercial zone.
So you can't apply it. But we should, the code update committee will definitely look at that because it's not great because you could create a very dense medical office that would have a lot of cars out and we don't know whether or not 35 will be sufficient. This new space is much more dense and it's much more efficient. Likely, there's a chance that 35 is enough. We can't ask for more than that because as we all agree, 35 spaces were approved for the medical use, right? So that's where we are. The code doesn't allow us to ask for, going forward, we need to update our code because medical offices aren't in homes anymore, right? So unfortunately, that's the way the code was written, so.
That's why I asked my question at
Right.
the beginning, because, when you think about the medical use of the parking and how, my wife goes to weekends over there, and the idea of so many people in one spot at the same time. Now, the senior center, I understand, they're gonna be bused in. I can't imagine an insane amount of people going in on the senior center, but that idea, of
Yeah.
everybody in
This
that
is it.
same location
It's
at the same
super
time.
dense.
That's what generated the question. But again, when you look at the tables that John has given to you, there's the 1 per 200 possibility
Here you go.
off of your
Huge
this,
one there.
public access, or public
And
assembly.
then all these offices,
Okay.
and this is just one floor, there's another floor. Oh, God, yeah. But unfortunately, that's,
So when can we discuss timing? I know you have your $1,000 attorney review coming up.
Yeah.
And you have, what's your timing on all this?
we're pushing this as fast as we can. I mean, we've been,
Give us an idea. When,
I mean, it would obviously be contingent on when the village board, when the mayor comes back to us with the opinion from the special counsel. We'll start doing our work, we're doing it now, obviously. So we'll have to do a technical review, which we'll probably just do offline, probably independently, because everybody's gonna have to go through and do their takeoff of the plans and check that work,
Right.
right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, if anyone has any more technical questions as far as
Right.
parking, internal traffic circulation, loading, I think the loading zone
Okay.
question was answered or confirmed.
No,
I think
well,
now would be the time to
well, let's confirm that. So,
talk to the applicant since he's
all right,
here.
let's
Well,
move.
it's a smaller truck now than what you had discussed even at the last one.
Well,
We
no,
started
it-
at 60, but then we. didn't
In
put
fairness,
that
it wasn't what,
35?
it wasn't what the applicant discussed. It was the postal rep just said at night we send a 60-foot tractor trailer.
No, but no, I know, but that was, previously we started with that, then at the last meeting,
Yes.
you had discussed, when I had asked
Yeah.
about the loading area, I thought it was a 35-foot truck. Now
I
you're,
think 30.
now you're smaller than that.
Exact measurement did I get in the letter that one was.
Right, I got
Right,
it,
right.
right. But now you're even smaller than that.
That's exactly.
Not a lot, but that idea. And we already talked about where that would go. And-
Well, let's confirm that. So this is, we're still working with this drawing?
The post office drawing hasn't changed, yes.
Okay, so this is a November of 2015 drawing?
Yes.
Okay, so. Oh, you have it?
Okay, it's shown right here on the blow up, but it's, if
Right.
you're gonna look at it, it's right here,
Okay.
okay? Same
All right.
place.
So we are in agreement now, because at that night, you know, and luckily we can all go back to the videotape, you know, I kept questioning Mr. Barshaw about he said there's no changes being made to the exterior of the building. I said, well, there are. There's the patio, which wasn't understood, which I don't know that the HDRB would have any jurisdiction over hardscape. I don't know. I'm not making a representation either way. But certainly the loading dock and the penetration to the building, obviously the faces 9D, anything from a public right-of-way would need to be looked at. But Mr. Barshaw kept correcting me, saying, no, that's already been approved. The plan, you know, the building inspector, code enforcement had handled it as a minor site plan adjustment and approved it in writing. He had the text of the letter but didn't have the drawings with him, right? We had requested them 2 weeks in advance. I'd gone to the office. He said he had them. When he came to the meeting, he didn't have them. So 3 weeks later, we got them. Those drawings were for building number 2.
Yeah, I think what he meant was it was approved at building number 2.
Building number
Yeah,
2.
Not, but it hasn't been at.
Okay, so that's will be part of this review too, is that loading dock there, which obviously, you know, it's our job, obviously, to make sure that the site circulation is maintained and that ingress and egress fire lanes, you know, Yes.
Just for clarification, it's not a loading dock, it's a loading area.
loading area, because it's on grade, yeah, it's on grade, right? Yeah, yeah, it's not a raised slab, it's just it's an on-grade slab.
So did did Dave still had questions about the one-way, two-way?
Well, I think, yeah, and I think we'll get into that when we go to, we're
Yeah,
gonna
look
have to
at the
do a
circulation.
circulation, because obviously, it doesn't appear from these September of 2015 studies, not studies rather, but just the building inspector treating the loading area. I don't know I think in building number 2, it would have been loading area 2. I think that I think was coming in on grade,
Yeah.
or not on grade, because that was raised, but on level with the floor. There didn't appear to be any maneuverability studies, any truck turn radius studies, or any circulation studies. It just it was just drawn there.
Well, the post office did that.
Well,
At
well, you would
last-
have to, you would certainly have to provide that, so we
Yeah.
know that, you know, so we know that the trucks.
I'm sure they're willing to provide that.
Okay, so,
That was discussed with the building inspector last week.
oh, it was,
The Postal
okay.
Service representative discussed in detail.
Yeah.
How the trucks would come in.
Yeah.
How they would exit.
And truck maneuverability, that's a very important issue on site safety, right? You know, what's that?
There were multiple ways, they discussed the multiple ways that the truck could go in and exit safely.
Great. Great, so we'll take a look at that, and, let's see, what else? I think Ezra, are you done? You have more?
I think so.
More? Nothing? All right, so the one thing we're gonna have to confirm this plan, which I think is no, this is not. This is the February 5th plan. So the plan that you want us to work with for the county's build-out is the January 19th plan?
Correct.
So the way, obviously, since the code enforcement officers and the building and the village engineer have
Just
applied.
one thing,
Yep.
in my email to you, I said, instead of 5,600 square feet, it would be 6,000, so it says
Yeah.
5,600 square feet on there.
Oh,
That
okay.
plan, Okay.
Yeah, but that's the number that we use anyway.
Yeah, it was the number you used, but on that
Yeah.
plan, it says 5,600.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't know if it's to scale, because it's, it's kind of, it's an overlay with just like a magic marker on top of the Leahy build out, it looks like. So what we're gonna need to see is the seating. Outdoor seating, is that part of, it has to be part of the parking calculation, right?
We're talking about park benches, we're not talking about seating.
Yeah, I was speaking to the attorney, thank you then.
I mean, outdoor dining or just outdoor benches?
I don't know.
I
It's
think
a
the
sitting
seating
area.
is in connection with dining and having people assemble. So,
Okay.
I mean, I guess that'd be really a question for the building inspector, but I don't think, if it's outdoor benches, then I don't think that would be
Right, so-
applied to the calculation, but if it's, perhaps if there's round tables outside, but even then, if they're used separately from the main dining area, the idea is if it's gonna generate more people, obviously benches won't generate more people.
Right. So let's compare these two.
Paul, do you know why they changed the seating arrangement? It looks to me, just rough numbers, that drawing versus the previous drawing is about half the seating. The first drawing has 96 table seats.
Yeah.
The current one has roughly
Well,
like 45.
there's certain restrictions in the lease, and, we wanted to make sure we controlled the amount of people in the space.
All right, so in effect, you probably don't know, but the existing facility that they use has roughly 96 seats.
Oh, it does?
Yeah. So now they're moving to essentially a smaller seating arrangement. Is that correct?
You'd have to ask the county, I don't know.
Okay.
That wouldn't make any sense. I mean, obviously the goal is not to serve fewer, that's certainly not what, Pat's been saying all this time.
So if you don't mind getting back to the schedule on this, because, at the end of the day, I'd love for you to approve our application, but, for me, it's more of a timing thing. Whether you approve it or you disapprove it, it's fine with me. I mean, I'd rather have the approval, but, I need to get to an end result. So that's why I'm asking you for timing. Are we talking about next meeting, we'll resolve something, or when are we talking about having some resolution on this?
I don't know that we can commit to a time, but it shouldn't be more than a couple meetings, I wouldn't think. It's really gonna depend on the timing. If we get different direction and we have to go back to the drawing board, or I can't predict what the final advice is gonna be, right? What do you think, John? We could be directed to be looking at something brand new.
I mean, yes, you could potentially.
I mean, it's not that I don't mind putting a pin in something, it's just I don't want to commit to a date that doesn't help you either, right? But we're certainly going to work as quickly as we can to move things forward. I mean, it's, now that we have clear direction, we understand the plans.
And we do appreciate that you shared the information that we asked for.
Absolutely.
That really helped, so thank you.
Would the timeline be based upon the second opinion of the?
Well, that's what I'm saying, it's contingent on
Right.
that's the starting point. The question is then what
Right.
that information is,
Right.
right? If the information is consistent and the work, we'll start immediately on a technical review of a change of use, applying place of public assembly to the 119 drawing. Now, we're still gonna have to clarify in this 119 drawing what the seating is, because this is pretty rough. I don't know if we can work from this drawing. I think they're gonna have to give us an updated drawing. I mean, there are some circles and ellipses driven. It's not clear what's seating and what's not on the 119 drawing. It's a pretty rough sketch. I mean, it looks like somebody just took, do you have that one?
It's the one where he just took magic marker and went over an old plan. It's
All right.
not
So for
very.
us
Do
to-
you have that updated, or?
Yeah, what we'll do is, we'll ask for the information from the county.
Yeah, so obviously we'll take, you take the outside perimeter and you have to provide at least one per 200, but no less than one parking space per 5 seats.
Let me just correct you 1 second there. That's something you're doing. No, we're not doing that.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's, no, that's fine. It's, so what we need is a drawing that allows us to do that.
You just tell us what you need. and we'll give it to you.
But the assumption would be that you're seating at least what you're seating at the old one or more. You know, I mean, what we don't want is to come up with drawings that produce something that isn't really going to happen.
You know, it's up to the county. All right, this is their
Okay.
space. You
Can I
know, they'll have to
interject,
address it.
please?
On,
Right now, the existing senior center can only fit about 35 comfortably. The capacity at the new building is gonna be no more than 99.
99 seats?
Yes.
Okay.
Could fit 99 in there. They're not saying that they're all gonna be eating at the same time. There may be seniors in the cafe, there may be seniors sitting, having a meal, but no more than 99, that's capacity.
So you could, so you could shepherd getting the drawing that shows 99 seats?
That's what I was told, that it was 99, yes.
Okay, great.
Just state her name for the record.
Yes,
so-
Barbara Scuchamara, Legislative District 1, who obviously is on you're on the Physical Services Committee, right?
Mhm.
So that's somebody, so,
Yeah, I think it's subject to a drawing, though. We'll get a drawing, and then we'll have an exact number.
right,
Okay?
okay. But the minutes should show that Barbara said that it's gonna seat 99. Thanks. All right, so I think that's all we need, right? Well, actually, we could proceed if we're gonna, you know, in advance of the drawing, and just start working from 99. And work backwards from that. The rest of it, like I said, is a perimeter. So what's, well, look, we can do it right here. Well, that's roughly 20 spaces, right? Yes. Right, but what the task would be is you take the outside perimeter, right? You provide one space for 200 square feet, but no less than one parking space per 5 seats. So Legislator Scuchamara is presenting that there's gonna be 99 seats. If you take 99 and divide it by 5, you need 20 spaces.
That's just in the dining area. There's also administrative area.
Right, but
We're gonna have to
it's-
discuss
it's
that,
one or the
we're gonna
other.
discuss that. You and I saw it differently, that you assign, you know, uses for what it's actually being used for. That's not John and Bill's direction. John and Bill's direction is there's one use. You can't then take office, right, or professional, some of the stuff is professional space, right? There's a multi-purpose exercise room. Is that,
But it's all in conjunction with the community center?
A place of
It's
public
all-
assembly.
It's all.
Yeah,
part of the
that
public
is, but the
assembly
administrative
operations.
offices aren't.
No, it's part of, you need administrative offices to run the senior center.
But they're not included in the 99 seats.
No.
Yeah, but it's still the one.
That's why it gives you the
200.
option of one or the other, because I want to make sure they're applying the most spots.
Okay.
so the correct technical review, in your perspective, you take the perimeter, right? You do one per 200, but no less than one per 5 seats, right? Okay, and so, and this is all related to seniors. There's a quote in the newspaper, from Legislator Scuchamara, that there's a restriction on the property from the Ales that it can only be used for senior. Oh, well, I guess you can't trust everything you read in the paper. I'm also the chief operating officer, not the chief technology officer, so in case anybody's taking notes. But, so that's not true? So there can be office space in here as well,
No,
or?
we're not doing office space, but we want it to be a community center as well. You know, the seniors are gonna be there from a certain time to a certain time. But I want, you know, we have a drug crisis in our community. I wanna be able to have programs for the youth. I wanna have eventually county services come over. We are very underserved. We deserve to have more county services over here. And
Right.
that's the long-range plan to do that as well.
Okay, so I guess there, you should review that quote in the paper then. That talks about you saying that they've confirmed that it will only be used for the seniors and that that's a protection, so. What? Yeah, that's for sure. Anybody have any other technical questions? So, that's about it.
Just a quick question. You did the 99, just remember, kind of new to this. Stick with that a little bit.
We like all perspectives.
The 99, that would be applying to 1 out of 5, 1 per 5 seats, correct? For the park.
Yes.
No less than, providing no less than
Correct.
1 spot for 5
And then-
seats.
But that would also, or
If the two,
the 6,000 for 1 per 200 square feet. Correct. So you're looking at 20 spots.
It's the greater
If you do
of,
it on
right.
one,
right.
or the 30 spots. But the old plan, you would pick 35 spots.
The old plan's 35 for the entire
Building.
Entire building.
Right.
Right, because remember, the medical use was the entire building.
Right.
You have a comment?
It was the entire use, not to go back over well-trodden.
Right, yeah.
It's my third meeting. I'm picking up pretty quick.
You're doing great.
I'm picking up pretty
Doing
quick.
great.
We did a meeting? We did a meeting. Oh, okay. It was- oh.
Can we ask for a clarification?
I'm sorry, who? Yeah.
My name is Grace Wilkie. I just wanted to ask if we could ask for a clarification.
Let me make sure, yeah, we'll go to public comment,
Thank you.
actually, when we're, anybody have any more questions? Nope.
So I'm assuming that you're going to continue to work on this every 2 weeks until it's resolved,
I
correct?
think we can, no, I think, look, the board can work offline independently without a quorum, right? We can actually start, because there's a technical review, so we can do that and be ready for the next meeting. We obviously, we can share information, we can't draw conclusions on that information, that has to happen in an open meeting. And we'll do that. Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
And you? Very
Sounds
good. Obviously, we'll engage John. I don't, what was the question about the building? Oh, we've cleared that up, right? We don't think outdoor seating is just outdoor seating, nothing to do with driving. Okay.
They're not doing programs out there.
It makes sense, yeah, that makes sense.
Paul, your current construction at the site is the water retention, is that right? What was happening today at the site? I'm just curious.
I wasn't there.
Wow.
But thanks for letting me know something was happening.
Oh, well,
Good to know people are
so I thought it
working.
was the water. Okay.
All right, what do we have? The board business. So new business. We have nothing new. I think we're good. So we'll move on to public comment. Is there any comment from the public? Yeah.
Me?
Can you state your name?
Yes, my name is Grace Wilkie. I'm nothing basically as far as any kind of title.
You're a resident of?
I'm a resident and I'm a math teacher. So mine is a mathematically related question. If you have 35 parking spots for the 10,000 at Leahy,
11,500.
oh, okay. And then your new center has 6,000, as the lawyer has said, for the community center, which relates to 30 parking spots. Then the 4,000 offices, whatever you want to call it, because they're always 1 out of 150, so it doesn't matter what they're called. That would be the other 26 spots that he was referring to give him the total of 56. I understood his back.
That's the attorney's review, yes.
Yes. So my question is, and if you take the 11.2, which would be decreasing it by 6, you're at 50. So I'm just going to say 50 and 35. You'll always have a differential then of 15. So in other words, Paul will always be behind if you're going with your numbers by 15. So I'm just saying that there'll never be an exact number for the two of you because he's working on an approval based upon the 35 parking spots. And the review from the lawyer is at 56. So you automatically have that increase there of the 50, less the 6. So you'd have the 15 parking spots. So it's either going to be something where he has to deal with the 15 parking spots, or you have to deal with the 15 parking spots and deal with some kind of he's dealing with a prior approval from the lady, I'm assuming at 35. You're not understanding the argument.
Not at all, to be honest.
Okay.
The 35 is still there.
Yeah, the 35
still
is
has
moving
the
over to building
35.
2. And we
Yeah.
haven't done a technical review, so we don't have a number yet. It'd be premature for us to be talking about any
If you have
number.
the 35 and he's he's at 56, you're at an 11 difference, yeah?
No, the 35 is the 35, it hasn't changed.
But if he's moving the community center.
It's applied to the use.
Correct, which changes the 35 to his 56.
Yeah, we can't really get into a technical review. It's a public comment section, so your comment is, what
And
it-
my comment is that I am concerned about your mathematics and how this will work. So mine is a mathematical differential that you have. So
Double
mine is
check
a
my numbers.
mathematical formula.
When we
Yeah,
have
so
our
when we have
numbers, we'll
numbers,
share them.
yes.
Send him my table so he can double check it too.
Yep.
When will you have the table available tonight for?
We don't actually. I came from the airport.
I have to separate it from the rest of the memo and I'll email it to you.
Okay. But there'll be something to review at some point soon. But it's very straightforward. I mean, it's a multiplier or a divider rather. Anyone else?
Mayor Morandi, this may help fall in the timeline. We are meeting with the attorney Saturday. I'm going to be meeting with her. It's a short review, obviously, for $1,000. I think we'd be able to, depending on her turnaround, like that week. So, and then we can pinpoint it. But
When's the next meeting? It would be the
About 2 weeks out,
second.
depends on her, you know.
Yeah, I wish you could turn around. It's a short week too, but just one day. But
Second Tuesday in June, right?
without question, at that meeting, we're gonna have an answer as to what we're doing. Right? That we can definitely promise you, because that's what you deserve. I mean, and that's what we've really been, trying very hard to do. If you talk to the applicants that came through here, they've been processed very quickly. Yes, Frank?
Frank Haggerty, 12 Main Street,
You get that, Rick? Michael?
and I hope my comment here is relevant. I have to apologize, it was not in the previous meeting, but in viewing the previous meeting, I understand the discussion of moving the senior center from building to the lake building relates to the levelness of the access, the levelness of the surface, of the access for vehicles, emergency vehicles, and so forth related to seniors at a senior center. And I just wonder whether or not in relationship to the proposal, it's been thought, or could be thought as you review circulation and these types of issues, that whether or not building one being an area that is somewhat more level, I mean, the entire structure, the entire lot has these challenges of being a sloped site. But if it really actually is very critical to have a level surface, the area around building one may be more level, and also just may separate postal operations from senior and visitor or community center operations. I just throw that out there. I don't know if you've thought about that.
We had asked that at the last meeting, and Mr. Galera said that building one is not an option. The original design, the original concept plan, it was to be at building number one.
Yeah.
But again, they presented a lot of information last week about why they were moving it. We obviously asked questions about it, and then that kind of got flipped around to why are you challenging where we're moving it? We're just asking questions. This is private property. You can, as long as you comply with code, you can move things around. All we're doing here is saying, okay, this is the code, right? So anything can be moved around. The planning board has no
And we can't tell.
concern, nor do we take.
And we can't tell them where to put
Yeah,
what.
nor do we take personal interest in where it is. I mean, the services are what was, at least the two were desired by the village, and it's an approved site plan. So I want to make sure that people understand the planning board doesn't have an interest, nor do we have any jurisdiction, and I certainly don't have any personal interest about where it is on the site. The question is, as I had said at the February 25th meeting, it's where we're beginning. It's how the prior approvals were done, right? But the location, the locus of use, while that was actually contemplated in the concept plan, the approving planning board did not carry those legislative protections over to the approved site plan. So we don't have them. Yes.
I have a few points I'd like to
Name please, James.
James Gettner, resident of Cold Spring. A point that Paul Galero made kind of rubbed me the wrong way. This idea that the senior center and the post office are somehow a gift from the developer to Cold Spring, I think misrepresents everything that has occurred for the last few years. There was an opportunity a long time ago to come up with a plan that benefited the village widely. and the village was widely ignored, and there was arm twisting, there was misrepresentation, there was a ton of lies, there was every type of bullying. And the developer chose to instead hold a treat out that would win a majority, and that treat varied at different time periods. The treat was a firehouse for a while. Then the treat changed to a senior center because it had more traction. But then it wasn't quite enough, so the treat turned into a post office. These are not going to be money loss items. So now there's a bunch of housing there, and they have one parking spot per 2-bedroom unit. That's modest. So maybe there's a density issue here. That seems to be obvious. Mr. Galero seemed to point out himself. Yeah, maybe the density has to be reduced to accommodate the parking available at that site. That maybe just have to be the reality. But to then go on and say that this board, who everyone on this board, just from everything I heard, is being eminently reasonable and accommodating, that there's gonna be suits, and there's gonna be discussion of fees, legal fees, and intimidation, and this like victim story that's going on is pathetic. It is truly, truly pathetic. And the legislatures that the comments made are just outrageous. And maybe everyone should just tone it down, see that what's been given so far has been a gift, and be happy with it.
Anyone else?
Barbara Scuchamara, legislator. I take really offense to those last comments.
I'm glad you do.
Mr. Galero has done nothing but offer this space for the senior center at a very reasonable rate, and the post office because it was needed in the village. If we lose this post office, we're gonna have everything in Garrison. Do you know the impact that'll have on Cold Spring residents? It'll be astronomical. The senior center, he could walk away from the senior center tomorrow and put whatever he wanted in there, but he's committed to the seniors. He's proved that constantly that he's committed for the senior center. The county is committed for the senior center. We need this center. We have the largest population of seniors in the county. We need this. And to totally ignore what this first planning board spent almost 3 years putting through and doing due diligence, dotting their I's and crossing their T's for 3 years. And I have nothing but respect for everyone on that planning board, as I do you, and I understand you're trying.
Your comments in the paper would not indicate that,
Well,
legislator Scuchamara, but
it's
please
very
continue.
frustrating. It's
We're
very
all
frustrating for most of this community to see this project being thwarted like it is. And you can look at me all you want, Stephanie, because I can't believe that it's taking so long to put this project through when there's really very little change to this at all. And you know, I'm an elected official, Dave is an elected official, we have a responsibility. You're an appointed board by this administration. And I think you're making more out of this than it has to be. And I think instead of meeting once a month, you know that time is of the essence for
We
this
meet twice a
project.
month.
If you could please find it in your, schedule to meet more often and get this project.
We meet twice a
through.
month.
Well, maybe you should meet more than twice a month.
Just for
We're
the
a
record,
volunteer board.
just for the record, you made a comment today, or when the paper was published, related to seniors and veterans. I'm a senior and a veteran.
On the senior
And-
no.
That's fine, but we are not obstructing the process. We are doing due diligence for the process and the way the process is laid out. I don't know how the legislator for the county works, but I know how we work related to the code and the requirements that are set forth. You may not like it, but that's the code.
I don't like it, and I know there's quite a few citizens in this town that don't like it.
Well, then they can all join boards and make changes.
Where the issue is to change the code. I mean, you're both quoted in the PCNR, Mr. Galero, and you, legislator Scuchamara, calling this board obstructionist. You say we're flexing our muscles, we have an agenda.
That's the way
Mary
it is.
Ellen Odell says that. Look, I mean, we have a job to do. I will tell you why I'm here, and I think the rest of the people here, because we live here and we love this place and we give back. A development is obviously a profit-driven motive. To suggest that we are obstructionist or that we have an agenda, or you have people saying that, that our opinions are because we hate seniors. And to the extent that you convince people of these misinformation, of these lies, you fray the public fabric that
No, I
makes
think
up
it's
this
the other
community.
way
I'm
around
speaking.
that.
I'm speaking. You do that, and you are part of this too.
And this is
People
why
need to understand what the issue is, which is there is code to be applied. That's it. There's nothing more, right? If you want to go get your law degree and be a land use attorney, then you can give an opinion that carries value, that carries weight about whether or not the code. Right.
It's your interpretation of the code, and we don't agree with that.
It's not my interpretation. It is the building inspectors and the village attorneys.
Well, I don't think it's the building inspector's interpretation. We could delve into that.
I sat with them for 2 hours and we went over it.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
look,
look,
regardless,
the newspapers,
the bottom
let me
line is,
just
we
say
have a
something.
position. No, let me talk a little bit, all right? You've been talking a lot. Let me just say one thing.
Well, it's our meeting, Mr. Galero. That's why we
Well,
talk.
this is public comment, right? Can I talk?
You're the applicant, but sure.
Okay. So, all I want to say is, if you really look at what's happening here, you could really see that we have the right, it even says in the code, there will be no more parking required for the uses, okay? And my attorney has cited this. And for some reason, you don't want to look at it, you just want to look at what you're looking at, and that's fine. But don't try to
You
look at...
need to address this to John, because
No, well, my attorney will address John. I'm just telling you, it's very clear, and I've had more than one attorney look at it, okay? Because I think that sometimes my attorney gets a little, too excited. But, so I did have somebody look at
Oh, good.
it. And it was just like, no, there's no way that you can win this in a court of law. Can you drag this out? Can you make it miserable for me? Yes. But you'll never win in a court of law. Okay, so,
I can assure
and that's
you-
why I want to come to an end result as quickly as possible, okay? Because if it's one road we'll go down, that's fine. If you want to sit down and maybe negotiate something, I'm willing to do that. If you want to go down either road, I'm fine, I just want to do it. I don't want to sit here for another 2 months. And that's my only point.
nobody does.
Okay.
We take time away from our families. We're a volunteer board. Yeah, I
I
don't know.
appreciate that.
I don't know about you, but this is not fun for me.
Yeah, I've been here
right?
4 years, I know it's not fun, believe me. I've been 4 years and $1 million. I know it's not fun, okay?
One of the concerns that I have, obviously being my third meeting, is that when there's suggestions of obstructionism and other things, I find it interesting that delays on a site are relatively common within developments. And the idea that one entity is responsible for that, I don't know, seems strange to me.
Well,
Because the reality is, it's not just a board, or, there's two players in this, three, the
Sure.
county. Because this has been such a complex development, I think there have been delays.
It's not usual to
just-
change your attorney that did the approvals on the project is no longer available. The planner is no longer available. The engineer is no longer available, okay? So everybody's got a learning curve here, all right? And everybody's gonna interpret those plans differently than the people who were here approving it. None of the people here, the planning board, other than Arnie, the planner, the engineer, or the attorney, they're not here anymore, okay? That was not my doing.
But, Paul, to be reasonable about this, you're talking about a process that has had an approval for over a year, and after that year was over, then changes were either necessary because of the county and the post office, or however they developed.
It was 5 or 6 months.
All right.
Because we had our approval sometime, I don't know, June, and we started this process with the building inspector in December, talking to him about how to do this. And I didn't get a commitment to the county, still don't have a commitment from the county, but anyway. Look,
Let's not rehash it.
Yes, I
but
agree.
That, the suggestion of one board seems strange, like I said.
okay.
Any more comment?
Any more comment?
Hi, I'm a senior, and I've been a
Your-
senior advocate.
your
Donna
name?
Anderson. I've been here for 4 years, so it's on. many, many hours. And all I need to say is that the seniors need the center as soon as possible. It is, you know, we have a lot of seniors waiting that have died. They have been waiting, a lot of them have died since. So, all I'm saying is we need this. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
My name is Leslie Gallimano, postmaster of Cold Spring. We have been looking in many places for a spot for the post office, and the village of Cold Spring did ask that we stay in close proximity to the senior center, so of course we have agreed to go into the Butterfield section. The post office, with all its rules and regulations, have decided that the Lakey building is much better suited for us because the federal government has so many rules and regulations supersede local agreements. So I just wanted to say the fact that town needs a post office and we need a home, and that looks like, you know, that is where the post office has agreed to go, and we really need to get into that state. So hopefully it'll be somewhere in the near future.
Is that the only, I mean, during your process, you guys have a very rigid
Yes.
process of public engagement. And so you did the public hearing, but then nothing was ever submitted as to potential sites.
Well, none of them were approved. We went up on Route 9, we saw like 4 different sites we possibly could have moved into, but none of our architecture, yeah, the architecture for our government went along with them, and they did not approve any of them. They tried to put it in Perks Plaza.
So what happened to the public engagement process? It just ended?
Well, they had a few meetings for it, and it did just end. I don't know if there wasn't any opinion, but also that the gentleman at that time, who was in charge of this area, my boss, he retired also.
Oh, okay.
There's
All right, very
always
good.
a big change.
Yeah.
Always.
Anyone else?
Grace Wilkie. I just want, I have to agree a little bit with the man behind me, just as far as cooler heads really get much further. So I know that there's a lot, it's a really high-pressured building, and are people in here. You take offense to what you read, she takes offense for 4 years. I mean, we understand both sides. I think what everybody would like is perseverance to get to the end product that the community would be happy. I think that's the end of it. That's what everybody wants. You do
Yep,
also.
absolutely.
So I mean, I don't think any one of us are at odds with the end product of getting something successful. Getting there will be the hard part. And, you know, so I just want you to say, I want to say to all of you, persevere. You know, just continue doing these meetings, maybe 1 or 2 times or 3, whatever. And, you know, don't give up, Paul, and let's get this all done. That's what I want to say for both parties, that you're both working.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else?
My math teacher told me in the 11th grade.
There you go, see, perseverance.
Okay. Hi, I'm Shirley Norton. I live in senior housing in Cold Spring. And I just wanted to say a word for the seniors who are not here tonight. We have a lot of seniors who would be here tonight maybe if it was an earlier hour, and I know you can't do that, you know. But I just wanted to put a word in for those of us who are disabled, who you know, have arthritis, who have diabetes. You know, we have a huge population of seniors. I mean, you're a senior and you're fine. I guess you're here, you know, whatever. I'm here, I'm not really fine, but I'm here. And, but those of us who have a lot of physical issues, you know, and we can't really come out, I just wanted to honor them, you know, that we have a huge need, a desperate need, especially for the nutrition program, and, you know, that's inadequate, I guess, right now. And you know, we're just waiting, and we don't want anyone to die before the thing gets going, you know. So I just wanted to put in a word for that population that's not here and that is waiting.
No, that's a lovely
Okay.
thought, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? James again?
It's my understanding that no one is in opposition to the senior center. It's
Not
also
bad.
my understanding
Thank you,
that everything being discussed here isn't in fact standing in the way of the senior center. In fact, it's my understanding that the senior center can proceed. What seems to be the subject is that there's obviously incentives for any developer to show as much of real estate into a piece of land as possible, and that's what's been done here. So the question is density. If the developer should choose to make the site less dense, then there's going to be sufficient parking available there, and the senior center and everything else can proceed. Right now, again, it's my understanding that the senior center can go on right now. There's no question about it. The question is, what about all the other buildings and all the other people going in and out of those buildings? So this meeting is partially a product that, the developer crossed that finish line, got what he wanted, but now there's a change. And whoops, now something has to be reviewed again. And, had this process been conducted differently in the beginning, there might have been a demand for more parking at that stage of the process. So the senior center is not up in the air. I think everyone's for it. It's really just a question of how much can pack on that site. The senior center, there's plenty of room for it. Maybe some of the other buildings have to be reduced in size.
Anyone else?
I'm sorry, it's Frank Aggregate. I really do feel that I have to follow up on the question in my mind is the stress, or the focus, or the pressure associated with this demand for a senior center as it applies to your function, the planning board. It does occur to me that you should be careful that you do perform your function and you not be unduly pressured from county or from newspapers or from anything on this topic, which we, I think, all agree there needs to be a senior center, but, and I'm speaking to some extent, this is really a multi-jurisdictional comment, because we have the county, we have the developer, we have the village, that in terms of a senior center, it does appear that this is being used as a very distracting is one word being used, wedge or form of pressure upon the planning board and upon the village, potentially. And I go back to my earlier comment. If, in fact, there is an approved site plan for a building that is level, and if, in fact, the developer does wish to offer or give back to the community a suitable, timely senior center or community center, I don't understand why that's not done. I'm talking about building number one.
In case anybody else has that, it goes to what John said earlier. Moving a use between 1 and 2 wouldn't really be an issue, right? Because they were brought up to code. The question is that the issue here is that Leahy was a pre-existing non-conforming condition, right? You don't like that? What are you doing?
Well,
Pick a word.
I don't know if you want to call it a pre-existing non-conforming use. But
Last meeting you liked that. What do you
well,
want?
it was a use that was, parking was assigned based upon historical use. It's kind of circular, but
Yeah.
it's one and the same.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
Semantics, I
All
guess.
right. Anyone else? Mr. Finnegan? You just
No.
we're just providing humor.
No,
Yeah, look, I mean, it's kind of where we are. I mean, it's just John.
Yeah, a very brief comment. John Cronin, I live at 64 Paulding Avenue in Cold Spring. I love attorneys. I know John from the Pace Environmental Litigation Clinic, and Mike's an old friend. But I think it's important for us all to remember that at some point, if I understand the code and the law, you also have some discretionary authority that you're going to get to exercise. And even though that's defined, even though that's defined, but it's still discretionary, and that's not unusual in a quasi-judicial war like yours. So I would just ask you that when you get to that point where you've listened to the competing attorneys, you've gotten your second opinion, and you've got to make a decision to use that discretionary authority judiciously and generously, and in the spirit of what's already been approved. Because it very well may be that discretion that you get to exercise is going to be the difference between whether or not this all goes to hell and turns into a huge internecine battle in the village, or it moves forward in the spirit of the decisions that were already made. So I would just encourage you to remember that when you get to that point in your decision making. Okay.
Very good, thanks. Anyone else? Close public comment. The only thing we have, the next piece is just we had gone in one of the meetings and looked at modifying the planning board application. Have a good night. Did everyone have a chance to review it?
Yeah.
So this represents the change. Did you have a chance to review it, John?
Is that
So,
the application?
yeah, I mean, we may, yeah, so here's this. So one thing that we talked about was, so a lot of the things were kind of weird. It was, it was just a little choppy. Is your, really kind of asking questions that really the planning board should already know by the time it's referred. So it's obviously to capture the information that we need to process the approval. There's this, I don't know, did you normally see this disclosure statement of section 809 of the municipal law?
It's
Okay.
a requirement under general municipal law.
So we'll do our review of it. If you could just take that and just make sure that it's okay. One thing that we'd like to add to the process that we discussed was an affidavit of ownership. I'm used to, what we do now is we just say, have the owner sign that form. That's not meaningful. I just had, why did,
Applicant to sign it as well as the owner.
well, because a lot of the, have a good night. A lot of the applications that we get on Main Street are not the property owner, they're a renter. So I just had a $700,000 claim on a building, right, where the owner turned around and said, I had no knowledge you're doing work on my building. And I said, no, let me show you your affidavits of ownership that you signed in your office with your notary, and there's their stamp. The guy just, he literally deflated. So I said, here's the proof that you knew the work that we were doing. That application with just some letter, right, without an affidavit of ownership doesn't do that, right?
So you're saying these are samples you
just
provide?
samples, right?
Yeah.
So one is the property that I was doing is in the village of Airmont. So, when we were successful in our claim because we had that. One of the big concerns I have is that we have people on Main Street changing uses of buildings they don't own, right? Does the property owner have the right insurance in place for a different use? Do they have? So I don't know how complicit the board is in these mistakes, but who wants mistakes, right?
Right. No, you should, because another thing is the escrow. If the escrow's not paid, I don't know how your code is written, but in other codes, you can attach it as a lien to the property. So if you have a tenant applying before a planning board that creates a large escrow and doesn't replenish it, and say walks away from the application without paying the escrow, the village or the municipality can then charge it on the property owner as a tax lien.
If we have an affidavit of ownership.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, so that's why I think one of the papers said, just trying to make more paperwork. Yes, it is more paperwork, but it's paperwork that adds value, right? Because they're making alterations to a building, they're coming before this board, we're changing the use of a building, right?
And it actually protects,
yeah,
it protects the applicant. Because there was actually a lawsuit was filed because the applicant had proposed a cell tower. Property owner was okay with it, but never signed the affidavit of ownership. And then when it got very controversial and residents were coming out and giving the property owner a hard time, he said, oh, wait a minute, I never approved this.
Right.
So then the applicant ended up suing not only the town, but he had to sue his landlord. So I think in the end, it protects the applicant as well as the village.
Excellent. So you're in agreement. I represented it to the board, I don't know, it was months ago at this point. But I said it'd just be nice, instead of just this, the property owner signs the application, right? Which doesn't mean anything. First of all, it doesn't even say they're aware of the scope of work that they're undertaking or the action that's in front of the board, right? So it really should just be this affidavit of ownership tied to a set of plans that then says, I know what you're doing to my building, right? And then, like you said, which I wasn't even aware of, then we can attach it as a lien, right? If the escrow doesn't get paid.
Yeah, if your code.
If the code allows for it, okay. So, has everybody reviewed this?
Yeah, there's a few type of things. I don't know if you want to do
we
that now or not.
You want to just send them to me? Well, subject to text and grammar, just for format.
It's a good idea.
Are we okay with going forward with this? subject to John's review and approval.
Yeah, and then.
Do we have a
then
motion?
Give it to me at the end and I'll give you your typos.
Okay. So do we want to, do you want to approve it now, or you want to do typos first and do a motion to approve it at the next
Well,
meeting?
We can approve it.
Okay. Motion to approve, do I have a motion to approve it?
Aye.
Just,
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
just
Okay,
don't
great.
duplicate it before.
Great, because there was a
you fix the problem.
confusion, you know, that the app, you know, in fact, actually Butterfield saying that they weren't aware we had an application. So we want to make sure that it's no longer considered a draft application.
Right, it was available online as a
We
draft.
haven't adjourned yet.
Right. Okay.
Arnie's running for the hills. here.
Exactly. All right, do we have a, I think, Arnie, would you like to make a motion to adjourn?
Absolutely.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We are adjourned.
Way past.
Thank you.
bedtime.
Matt?
No, she's
The form you just approved, what was the name of it?
It's a planning board application.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm good, thank you so much. Thanks, oh, and everybody, thank you so much for coming at 8. Sorry to make you all stay out later.
And if we had come at.